The distant hum of the massive engine pulling us through the vast unknowns of space had been audible every time I listened for it. Until it wasn't. The ever present sound assured everyone on board that their life was in good hands. It was just too inconvenient to consider that it might be ripped from us without explanation. My upper body sprung upwards and out of the sheets as a crew member dressed in dark green shook me awake. What's happened? It better be good to wake me up so early, I spouted, fighting to grip onto some awareness of the situation. We aren't sure, replied the crew member, hesitantly. I was just told to get you to the bridge as soon as possible. I reached out for a shiny mug on my bedstand and practically threw it at the crew member. Get me something hot, I said, rushing out of the doorway. Flying through the spotless white halls of the ship, I realized the many crew members I'd usually pass were completely absent. Where is everyone? There are jobs that need to be done regardless of whatever has happened, I thought to myself. Only when I reached the bridge did I finally find someone. Except it was a lot more than just someone. It was nearly the entire 250-man crew. My second in command, Russell Smith, stepped forward and began to explain. Our engine is stopped, our ship is too distant from any checkpoint, and we have nothing more than theories about what happened. The crowd parted as I walked through them, causing a few members on the edge to be pushed over. I turned back around towards Russell and replied, You sound so concerned. Is something wrong? Captain Charn, the ship isn't moving. We could die, said Russell, losing his composure. Come on, we're Green Corp, conquerors of the corporate galaxy, I said, more to the crowd than to Russell. We've got nothing but the best of the best, so I won't hear any of this nonsense. You said you have theories. Well, give them to me. We're on a tight schedule. Hesitating for a moment, Russell retrieved his clipboard and replied, Yes, sir. The engineers claimed the fuel could have been clogged, which they would be able to safely fix if given time. He motioned towards a group of crew members all wearing bright orange uniforms instead of the usual dark green ones. Noticing I was observing them, many of their postures suddenly shot up, and all of them saluted. I tilted my head to the side and said, Well, it sounds like that's the best course of action. I waited a moment in anticipation, but found myself disappointed. Raising my voice, I yelled, Well, get on it then! Everyone, including the engineers, quickly dispersed, leaving the bridge significantly less crowded. Seeing the first crew member hand me a warm coffee, Russell approached cautiously and said, You've only been here a week and they're already scared of you. They aren't scared of me. They respect me, I said, not even looking at him. Though my hand shook as I sipped from the mug, I knew the situation could turn out to be a good thing. If I could get the ship working again without any outside help, it would prove that I was a competent captain and therefore the right choice for this promotion. Russell nodded and walked away, leaving me with no kind of objective. Clearly the ship was not moving, so there was next to nothing for a captain to do. That's when I had an idea. My lips curled upwards as I thought. If I oversee the engineers, I can make sure morale stays up. Sure, it might imply that the situation's more serious than it is, but that just means I'll be praised even more for saving everyone. I sipped once again from my mug, except this time my hands were still. The room was very different from the rest of the ship in all imaginable ways. Black dust covered every surface, and the lighting was dim at best. I stepped closer to the enormous engine in order to get a closer look. It appeared to be a massive metal box with a black tube attached to the top. One of the engineers had previously informed me that that tube happened to be where the fuel came in from. Two engineers carefully maneuvered from one side of the box to the other, doing some kind of work on the tube where it made contact with the metal. How long do you figure this operation will take your men? Asked the head engineer. Oh, no longer than 4 hours, he replied nonchalantly. I grimaced at this statement, but did not say anything. The following 2 hours proved to be pretty uneventful. However, things started to become more interesting when various other crew members, with nothing better to do, found their way to us. At first they just watched in awe as the engineers began to use heavy machinery to work on the tube, but as the minutes passed, some appeared to worry. I merely assured them they would not only return home alive, but would be celebrated, when something particularly interesting caught my eye. A large, gray, bearded man wearing a bright green and gold uniform was staring at me. Though I had never seen him before, I immediately knew who he was. When I was given my ship 2 weeks previously, I was told that the first delivery I would perform would be carrying more than just Green Corp cargo. They claimed I would be giving a ride to a prestigious representative tasked with negotiating prices for some big deals happening at our destination. This man had to be the representative. His uniform was only worn by those of great importance to Green Corp, a group even I, as a captain, wasn't included in. I shifted my gaze and continued to answer the pleas of my crew, as usual reminding them that their lives were in the protecting hands of Green Corp, a very good place to be, if you ask me. However, when I turned back to the representative, there was no one to be found. Must be bored of watching the people below him, I thought to myself, chuckling under my breath. Before I could return to the ever-growing crowd of onlookers, Russell burst into the room, a triumphant smile on his face. "Captain! Good news! We're saved!" He yelled out loud enough for everyone to hear. I felt as if a weight had been dropped through my throat and into my stomach as his words materialized in my brain. There was a specific safety procedure I had been told of a long time ago that I realized I should do whatever I could to avoid. I grabbed hold of Russell and dragged him out of the room, yelling back to the crowd, "Of course we're safe, the engineers are almost done," as I went. Looking away, I whispered, "We need to have a little talk outside, Russell." Immediately as we left the room, Russell said, "Green Corp detected that something was wrong. They said they could send a ship to help if we need, which I think we do." "No, shut up!" I screamed, causing him to jump back quite a distance. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't understand what the problem is," whimpered Russell, attempting to regain his balance. Taking a deep breath, I replied, "Walk with me. I think it's important you understand something." Russell nodded shakily and came to my side. Before I began to speak, I noticed he had turned his head to the left, where he could see outside the window stretching all the way across the White Hall. In particular, he was looking at a bright green planet easily viewable from our current position. That planet, GC-11, is Green Corp controlled. Being so close to something like that can only suggest we are completely safe. "There's really no question. Everyone on the ship will be fine," I said, pacing down the hallway. I turned my head to face forward rather than out the window and continued. "As you know, I just got this ship, and it would mean the world to me if I could keep it. If I was to call in backup from Green Corp, not only would we deliver our shipment extremely late, but the fuel and crew fees would be doubled. All of which being my fault, because I was unable to deal with the problem myself." "I see," replied Russell, without much confidence. "But if we don't ask now, they'll break off contact with us until we arrive at our destination." Much quieter, but still audible, I said, "That just increases the tension as everyone waits for our arrival." Russell exhaled sharply through his nose, but kept his mouth sealed. "So, I hope you get why I believe we are currently on the right path. In any case, I ask that you decline the request for backup and refill this with some coffee," I said, handing Russell the mug, all too aware that he was tightly pursing his lips. I reopened the doors almost as triumphantly as Russell had just a few minutes ago to find that the head engineer, along with everyone else occupying the room, were staring directly at me. A smirk rose on my face as I asked, "Have you finished? I can see you've definitely made progress at least." I pointed towards the now detached black tube as it hung above the box. "Captain," said the head engineer cautiously. "Captain, we have an issue. There isn't a clog in the fuel." "Okay, so what? If it's a problem with the engine, I'm sure you can fix it in no time at all," I said, expecting this to be obvious. "Sir, there isn't a problem with the engine," said the engineer, running his wrinkly hand through his short, dirty brown hair. "Well then, why aren't we moving?" I asked. He hesitated for a moment, but said as he took a step back, "We have no fuel at all." "Why? What could you possibly mean by this? Green Corp would never have sent us to make our delivery if we didn't have more than enough fuel to do it," I said, almost chokingly. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't know why," replied the engineer, stepping back again as if to escape into the crowd. A shudder ran through my body as my brain went into double time. "All we have to do is contact GC-11, the planet just outside," I said, slurring multiple words along the way. "It's Green Corp, so there's no doubt they will help us." "We're Green Corp." The crowd didn't appear to care much for this answer, as many of them were now shifting in place. The head engineer stepped forward again and asked, after a few moments of intense breathing, "Are you sure this will work?" "I'm positive," I replied. "Assuming we have the correct amount of electricity, we can survive for at least another week here, which is more than enough time to contact them." The crowd calmed down and even began to disperse as the engineers packed their equipment. Pacing back to the bridge, I restrained my throat to prevent it from screaming. My opportunity to prove myself had been torn away, leaving me with nothing whatsoever to work with. I would be seen as a bad captain no matter what I did. The bridge had not yet been refilled with its crew, but rather only held me and Russell. At least that's what I thought until I registered a gruff voice behind me. I turned to see the old representative sauntering forward. "It's not going to work. Your plan. It's impossible," said the representative sternly. "I'm sorry, but I don't think you would understand," I replied in a tone you would use to talk to a baby. "I just need to contact whoever's on GC-11 and everything will be okay." "I don't think you understand," he replied, increasing his pace. "That planet outside is GC-13. I know because I have been there myself." I paused for a moment, wondering if I could have been wrong. Realizing it didn't matter if I had been, I replied with, "Oh, then you know that we'll be just fine after getting help from them. In fact, you might even have some extra influence that could support us," I said, my tone still remaining calm. The representative stopped right in front of me and said, "Do not speak when you have nothing useful to say." He pointed his finger out the bridge window right at the green planet. "GC-13 was subject to a massive mining disaster. They used to collect the minerals and gases the planet produced until said gases became too hard to control. One whiff of the stuff, and you're as good as dead. My name is Ratchet Snook, and I personally convinced the head of Green Corp to evacuate the planet at my own expense. They said it was my fault for not overseeing it well enough to stop the gases from getting out of control, and yet I had been competent enough to save countless lives." He dropped his finger and turned away before slowly continuing. "Working that job may be nothing more than a distant part of my past, but I know I made the right choice. Unfortunately, it appears to me that you've already made the wrong one." "Go back to your quarters, Mr. Snook," I growled. "You can return to your previous activities with the peace of mind given by the knowledge that I will make everything okay." Mr. Snook turned away, but smirked as he did so. "I wish you the best with your avoidance of the facts. But know that the very cargo you're trying to ship is the same gas I saved my crew from. We didn't live on hope of being able to keep mining, but rather took what we had and left." My body ached with some kind of pain not being broadcasted from anywhere in particular as I lay in bed. Who does that man think he is? He's no captain. He doesn't have any idea what I'm doing, I thought to myself. A dark feeling fell over me as I realized that I didn't know what I was doing. Well, I didn't agree with Mr. Snook. If his story was true, I knew we were in a pickle. I trust Green Corp. They wouldn't just let us die out here. I thought again. Except they had already done what they could. They asked if we needed help, and I said no. There has to be something else I can do. Some way I can still come out of this both alive and on top. I turned my head on its side to gaze at my bedstand. The coffee mug sat atop it, once again empty. However, that was not what had my attention. I began to reach out to the top drawer of the stand with my right hand, but faltered just short of it. I breathed in through my nose, sensing no odors coming from the room around me. At some point, the grip of exhaustion dragged me into slumber, but it was against my will. I wasn't done thinking. I knew there was still something I could do. I just had to find it. As I strolled through the halls the next morning, it felt as if the walls around me were going to collapse. Though the crew wasn't absent this time around, that didn't help my nerves much considering the looks they gave me. Some were sitting on the floor, some were curled up on their sides, but none of them were happy to see me. As I continued, one of the engineers shouted out to me, "Green Corp, Conquerors of the Galaxy. What a name, huh? Wonder how they managed to get it with how incompetent they are." Ignoring him, I took a few more steps, but was shouted at once again. "Didn't the captain say we were Green Corp?" What a shameful accusation. Hysterical laughter shot through the rooms and ricocheted off the walls. I turned back towards the men and said, "I'm glad to see you're all in such a good mood." A flame exploded in my stomach as I was met with more hysterical laughter. "The lot of you need to find something to do, or I'll throw you off my ship personally." While they didn't immediately stand up and leave, the laughter was halted at the very least. My limp body dropped into the captain's chair as a plethora of unwelcome questions swirled around in my head. Is there anything else I can do? I wondered over and over. How is it possible an entire Green Corp shipment could be lost from such a trivial mistake made by someone so far away? My body shook as I held up the empty mug at my side. Raising my arm to hurl it across the room, another question entered my mind. This is your first shipment, isn't it? How do you know they aren't testing you? My shaking slowed as I lowered the mug onto the arm of my chair. I guess it's a possibility, I said, just quiet enough for it to go unnoticed by Russell across the room. Maybe they want to be sure I'm willing to take risks, I said, this time catching Russell's attention. Excuse me, did you say something? He asked, taking a step forward. Oh, don't worry about it, I replied, waving my hand. I was just thinking that it was about time to contact GC-11. Terrified, Russell tried to say, but, sir, that man from yesterday said, oh, he doesn't know what he's saying. The man's just telling tall tales so he can relive some kind of glory days, I said, interrupting Russell. Cautiously, he replied, well, then I guess there's no harm in trying. He turned away once again, leaving me to my thoughts. Even if this isn't what I'm supposed to do, it's like Russell said. I won't lose anything from giving it an honest shot, I said, no longer having to worry about being overheard. At least, I thought that was the case. What a waste of time. Did I not tell you it wouldn't work just yesterday? Asked Mr. Snook, entering through the doorway Russell had just left through. What I as a captain do is of no concern to you, I replied. You act like your life is the only one in danger, said Mr. Snook, chuckling quite audibly. You are mistaken. I have a plan, and it will save everyone, I said, refusing to look at him. He smirked as he asked, Oh, really? May I please hear it then? I'm sure if I just know, then I won't feel inclined to bother you anymore. Without wasting a second, I replied, Keep in mind this is not my only theory, but I believe Green Corp is testing me. I just need to display my unwavering loyalty to the company and to keeping my crew alive. The representative tried and failed to speak multiple times as he was interrupted by multiple deafening, laughing fits. You only believe what you want to believe, Captain, he finally managed to say. Composing himself with a deep breath, he continued. You give Green Corp far too much credit. Do you really think they care enough to put in that kind of effort for every new captain? Again, without wasting any time hesitating, I replied, Yes, I do believe they care enough. How else did they become such a successful company? By being cheap, said the representative, inhaling sharply through his nose. They have become masterful at underpaying employees and buying only the cheapest equipment. Not only do they not care about you being up to par, they don't care if this whole ship just disappears. I attempted to protest, but was interrupted before I could even start. Why do you think they break contact the instant you give the all-clear? Asked the representative, rubbing his forehead. Answering his own question, he continued, Because they can easily shift the blame on you. Losing one of their many ships isn't the best for them, but what is much worse is the loss of reputation they will suffer if it's discovered that they made a mistake, like forgetting to refuel. Sir, you're not making any sense, I said, continuing to gaze in the opposite direction of him. Grabbing me by my hair and twisting my head around him, he spouted, They know what they did. They could see there was extra fuel after you left. If they really cared about any of us, they would have sent someone even after you gave them the all-clear, because they know for a fact that we will never be able to make it. Attempting to ignore the pain of my hair almost being pulled out of my head, I asked, What do you mean? They care about you. Your green and gold uniform is unmistakable. Pushing me away, the representative replied, If you'll remember from the story I told you just yesterday, I'm known for being the guy who made it impossible to profit off of GC-13, and not the hero who saved countless lives before then. He paused for an uncomfortably long time before continuing in an even gruffer voice. They can completely rid themselves of my harmful reputation and their own childish mistakes by merely pinning all the blame on you. They'll say you made a mistake, and you were too proud to admit it, so you ask that no one was sent to help. Therefore, Green Corp did nothing wrong. Neither of us spoke for an uncomfortably long time, but when Mr. Snook opened his mouth again, I turned away and said, I don't want to hear any more of your bogus theories. As I don't want to hear any more of yours, said Mr. Snook calmly.
when you come to terms with the facts, I hope you understand that we can still do some good. You mustn't let your men die believing in a lie.
He walked out of the room without another word, but did so quickly enough that I couldn't say anything to counter him. He is very good at making life grim, I thought to myself. I fell back into my captain's chair and stayed there for a long time. What could I possibly have to lose by trying to save my men? I thought, listening to the utter silence around me. Then, what if he's right? I wouldn't even be allowed to return if Green Corp really has that much to gain from my ship's disappearance. I groaned quite audibly, only to be interrupted when Russell returned. Captain, he asked, as if waiting for a response in order to continue. Spit it out, I said unenthusiastically. There was no response. By all means, we are alone, said Russell, making eye contact with the floor. I attempted to accept these words, but could not rid myself of a nagging feeling from somewhere inside of me. Surely they can't really be testing me, I thought to myself. I waved Russell to leave before my mind continued. But why not be hopeful? I don't have anything left to lose by doing so. I gazed out the massive bridge window to see the green planet. If they really were testing me to see if I was competent or could take risks, then maybe the obvious solution wouldn't be the right one. I sighed once again, desperate for anything to latch onto. I again lay wide awake on my bed, but this time it was different. Though my mind rushed back and forth for solutions, it never considered opening the drawer under the coffee mug. I knew that wouldn't solve anything, and if I was correct about this whole thing being a test, opening the drawer would, without a doubt, be the worst way of solving it. As I continued to be without a wink of rest, a question drifted into my head. Is there something else I can do to prove myself? Prove that I would do anything to save both my crew and my cargo? Maybe I could. Slow but heavy knocking banged at my door, causing the coffee mug to shift in place. Come in, I yelled, not actually wanting them to do so. The door gradually creaked open, revealing the huge form of the representative, Mr. Snook. Captain, I hope you have thought over what I have said. If that is the case, I want to make a suggestion. He said, now observing my room with his hands on his hips. Thought over what? That we're all going to die and there's nothing anyone can do about it? I'd rather not, thank you, I replied. Mr. Snook paused before saying, There is something you can do, though admittedly it is not the solution you're looking for. I'm going to suggest that you give your crew an opportunity. What could you possibly be talking about? I asked, bewildered. Tell them no matter what you do, they will die. Then tell them they may write letters to their loved ones that will be delivered once the ship is eventually recovered, said Mr. Snook, looking down at me. He paused once again before continuing. Of course, these letters will never actually see the light of day. Your crew will believe they will. Why? How will this help anyone? I asked, stepping out of the bed. Mr. Snook laid his hand on my shoulder and said, Captain, your men will not die with hope in their hearts. However, they can die believing they said everything they needed to say. They can die with a different kind of hope. They can die believing someone will think of them as more than just the crew who perished transporting a cargo for someone else. Cargo meant to kill people. Is that what the gas is for? I asked, taking a step back. You will assume anything to make Green Corp a moral company, said Mr. Snook, a somber look appearing on his face. Please, be better than them and have some sympathy for the people on this ship. Leaving no stone unturned is nothing but a waste of time when the stones are but pebbles. There is nothing for you to find. I fell back onto my bed without saying a word. I didn't want to admit it, but I was considering the man's suggestion. However, my mindset shifted rapidly as I deciphered a simple string of words drifting to me from Mr. Snook. You wouldn't believe it, but they said I was in the wrong back in the day for just assuming the gas killed people without proving it. I had all the reason to believe it did, but it didn't matter. Of course, now they know the gas is used specifically for that purpose, but they still weren't happy with me, he said, letting out a chuckle. Sometimes making assumptions and giving up are what can save you. You don't need to know that your crew is doomed to show them kindness. Mr. Snook left the room, leaving the sound of his footsteps echoing through the hall outside. Something about his last statement was bothering me. It was like an itch spreading through the fleshy matter of my brain. Rather than attempting to fall asleep and process what I had heard, I suddenly stood up, causing the blankets I was sitting on to fly across the room.
I appreciated his sentiment, but I knew my men would be much happier alive than dead. It was a simple choice. On top of that, I had finally found a use for the item in the drawer. As my shaking hands pulled it open, the drawer seemed to shake as well. Everything had finally clicked. I knew what Greencorp wanted. Suddenly, a different click came from the door. Russell peeked his head in the room and began to speak. "Sir, the rations are thinning, and it's only a matter of time until the crew realizes." He paused. The life from his face was ripped away in an instant as he gazed into the drawer. "Why do you... You never believed I could save us," I said, glaring at the white floor. "You thought I was a maniac the whole time." I raised my right arm out to Russell, but my palm was closed. My index finger closed around the oily black metal, and I closed my eyes. I only did what I had to. He would have tried to stop me from saving them anyway. The walk through the pristine white halls was glorious. My men cheered and ran about, sharing the news, though I could not hear exactly what they were saying. We were saved. I had figured it out. Of course, I hadn't told them yet, but clearly they could tell some way or another. I took a right instead of entering the bridge and just marveled at the view of a massive steel airlock. Looking around me, I was stunned to find myself alone. I couldn't understand why the crew, who were clearly so happy to be saved, didn't even want to see it happen. I decided it mattered not and pushed forward. I opened the first half of the airlock. It did not close behind me. A closet to my right sprung open, revealing a yellow hazmat suit, but I ignored it. Before I could open the second door, something pushed me forward. I turned to see Mr. Snook with the same pale look on his face as Russell had. He screamed at me, but I did not want to interpret what he had said. I lifted my right arm once again, this time pointed at the representative. The metal was now more than just oily. As my index finger closed around it, there was so much oil it splattered onto my face. "No matter," I said out loud, turning back to the second door. I clicked a button to the right of me and opened my arms wide, dropping the gun in the process. Ratchet Snook had failed, but I knew better. I took a deep breath, one filled with more flavor than I had ever known possible. I had left no stone unturned. If there was a way to save my crew, I had done it. If there wasn't, that breath was my very last.